Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of the Buddy Study Group for individual solutions. I almost said for worksite solutions, but I think the topic today has a lot to do with my experience with worksite solutions. So I want to have some education about education. I would also love to hear a little bit about how you guys do it. I think when we educate clients, we all do it a little bit differently. And I don't think we've had many sessions where we've come together and kind of shared each other's educational styles or just thoughts on how we actually educate our clients and prospects on long-term care. So, what I mean by this comes from my experience in worksite long-term care is that over the last couple of years, I've done hundreds of webinars for employer groups. And when you do something that many times, you really start to think internally about the way that you do it because you're constantly just trying to get better each and every day. But I realized when working with employer groups, these are not necessarily people who have voluntarily raised their hand about group long-term care before their employer started offering it to them. So what I realized is that people of all different types of experience with long-term care join on those webinars, and the questions are really, really wide-ranging. Okay, so they can range from questions where I almost think this person is a long-term care professional because of how good their question is. Asking about um, 2 of 6 ADLs or asking about indemnity versus reimbursement without sort of being prompted to do so. But then there are people who have very, very introductory questions. And when I started to get those questions more and more, I realized, wow, I really can tend to blow past the stop signs when I present on some of these things. And I want to make sure I don't miss the most basic and foundational things about long-term care education. So I think if we can identify anywhere where we do that ourselves, and just sharing a little bit of our approach to education, whether it's meeting one-to-one with a prospect you know next to nothing about, or you're meeting with a client you've known a long time, or we get a lot of people saying, I'm going to a networking event, or I've been invited to speak at an assisted living facility, or I'm speaking to a group of financial advisors, whatever it may be. We really got to make sure that we don't presume anything about the audience that we're in front of, large or small, right? Um, because as long-term care specialists, you have to be a bit of an insurance nerd. You have to be a bit of a long-term care nerd. And sometimes we get so stuck in our own day-to-day and what we have to learn each and every day to be effective that we forget that we might be starting on step 3 when we really have to start at step 1. So that was kind of the basis of the discussion I wanted to have today. I wanted to cover a couple really foundational points that really led me here to have this study group session. And I would love to hear from you all, even if it's just an idea of I generally try to cover the same bases every single time, and here they are. Um, so, just to dive into it, one of the topics that I really want to make sure we cover is the fact that long-term care education really needs to mention, um, of course, about having a plan. But when you're offering an insurance product, it's one of many ways that you can plan for extended care, right? You don't want to necessarily pressure somebody into thinking that purchasing a long-term care insurance policy is the only way to plan for long-term care, number one. But number two, I really think it's important to talk about the power of professional care and that a major part of planning is planning to fund that professional care. Now, I don't feel silly saying this, um, but it did feel silly to kind of step back and say, wow, I really have to put a focus on this. Some of you may have that same sort of feeling. Um, but funding professional care is so important. And a lot of this education comes up naturally in your guys' process, right? Because I know many of you ask about family, you know, who do you want to protect if you have an extended care event? What would you like to protect if you have an extended care event? Um, and I think one of the ways in talking about family a lot in the planning process that we can put a spin on it is actually talking a little bit more about funding professional care, what that means, what that costs, and the ways that you can do it. Um, so I want to show you a slide from one of our group prezzies. I've probably shown a lot of you this because I really, really enjoy using this slide. It is a very, very just a solid to the point slide. And the way I run through this slide, because at this point we've already talked about family, at this point we've probably already talked about um, professional care, funding professional care. We've talked about the plan to a degree. Um, but I will always want people to understand, what does a holistic long-term care plan look like in my eyes? And so we have these four pillars on the slide. We have family, we have self-funding, we have insurance, and we have government. Now, I would say government is a little bit of a wild card. This is here to say it can provide some. It might not provide the protection that you think for long-term care. And it allows me to get a little bit into the Medicare versus Medicaid discussion. It's always important to sort of dispel that common misconception, oftentimes before it can even come up. But I really like to talk about the first three pillars, and I like to say a holistic long-term care plan is generally using a little bit of all of these pillars in some way, shape, or form. And I think it's important to bring this up because these generally tend to work together and they complement each other's weaknesses with their strengths, right? So when we talk about family and long-term care planning, some of us may ask, who is it that's going to be taking care of you if you don't plan to fund professional care? Oftentimes, it's a family member, right? And that family member, number one, it's important to ask, have you had this conversation with your family member? If I need extended care, I've named you as my caregiver and you will play the following roles. And have you asked if what they think of that, right? I think that's a provocative enough question for starters. But in many cases, whether it be for cultural reasons, we've discussed that on the study group before. I've met with clients who culturally just believe that family is the primary caregiver and that's it and that's all, because that's the way we've always done it going back generations. I can totally understand and empathize with that, and I want to respect, obviously your right to follow your cultural norms, but there's still a way you can kind of put a spin on that education. So professional care does not necessarily mean the absence of a family caregiver. What professional care can really do is to help change that family caregiver's role in your caregiving from direct hands-on caregiver, not maybe having to do as much of changing you, changing the bedpan, giving you baths, things of that nature. They may not be built to be able to carry you around the home, right? A lot of these things are generally what we want professional caregivers to be helping out with if we can, right? And the family caregiver can maybe take on a role that is still contributing to caregiving. There is no doubt, but maybe less of the hands-on, a little too intimate for family member to family member, um, contact for our liking. The family member themselves can start to work on things like laundry, like keeping the house clean and in good working order, doing the grocery shopping, so that you maybe have some time and some willingness left over to still be a family and, eat meals together and play cards instead of always having to be that hands-on caregiver and maybe saving that family member a lot of burnout, a lot of stress, a lot of strain on their relationship, a lot of resentment, because those things will come whether your family member is ready, willing, able, and totally committed to being your primary caregiver or not, right? So that family bullet accomplishes a lot that I wasn't necessarily covering all the time when meeting with clients. I think it's so important to be able to cover that and to cover the relationship between family and professional care, either respite or changing the family member's role to something much more pleasant, manageable, and familiar to them as far as day-to-day activities go, still being able to help out with your caregiving, even being the overseer of the professional caregiver, whether it be interviewing and bringing home health aides in or taking you around to view different assisted living facilities. The role of the family member is super important. And you know what? Even in the insurance bullet, when we take that into account, right? Insurance generally has an elimination period. Of course, there are some without an elimination period. That can be something that you find is very valuable to the client. It may allow you to choose between one product or another, but some insurance plans are going to come with a 90-day elimination period. Family can help you really bridge that gap as well as self-funding, right? So we get into a point where we're talking about the interrelatedness of these pillars of holistic long-term care planning. And you really, I think, drive home an understanding that it's going to take multiple different areas of planning to make sure that you're good for long-term care. And instead of just giving cost of care numbers and scaring people into, shoehorning one solution into their long-term care plan, talk about it from a holistic point of view, and I guarantee you will get people to really understand that it is about a plan beyond insurance. I think that's one of the most important takeaways going over something like this can really give, and um, and can really help families, right? It can help families from a lot of that suffering that happens in an extended care event and can really make somebody more likely to move forward. So we talk about family as one sort of aspect. We talk about insurance and self-funding as two sort of interrelated pillars that contribute toward funding professional care, right? And this kind of allows me to set up if I have somebody who is committed to self-funding or their advisor has told them that they can self-fund, I'm already laying the groundwork to not be confrontational to that and say, hey, look, self-funding is actually part of a holistic long-term care plan. But generally, insurance is going to provide a number of different benefits that self-funding just cannot, like tax-free benefits, like benefit receipt that is irrespective of market performance, right? It's not going to put you in a position where you have to sell your assets low. It's going to, again, provide you out of the box with significantly leveraged long-term care benefit. And that self-funding bucket may take some time to grow. You're essentially purchasing long-term care dollars as at a discount with insurance, but not everybody, and I would say most people are not funding 100% of the cost of care with insurance. Actually, very few people are, whether they are completely unwilling to or it's infeasible for them financially. People aren't covering 100% of the cost of care through insurance alone. So self-funding is that natural complement to using insurance to fund professional care. They work very, very well together. So I think just this aspect, it was important to put in front of you guys. You may talk a lot about this, but I just wanted to show you a different spin on the group side. This is kind of how we relate these pillars to each other to say overall that there is more to long-term care planning than just insurance. And to get that perspective really helps people to understand how they all work together and really, I think, can inspire people to have conversations with their family about their long-term care plan, right? It is even worse when you end up in a scenario where the family member has been deemed the primary caregiver in a certain situation and they didn't know it, right? That's a pretty bad surprise and leads to a ton of strain. So letting that family member know that you have a plan, asking, you know, I have XYZ ideas, would you be involved if I needed care? That I think really saves a lot of future trouble. So that was really number one on my list of things like, wow, I really don't peel back those layers of the onion enough in my everyday conversations with consumers about long-term care. So I wanted to make sure that I got that point across. But I think number two, and I also encountered this on group webinars, is there are so many different types of long-term care insurance or non-insurance long-term care solutions that are out there on the market. Um, Again, this might be one that many of you cover a lot, and I know many of you cover a lot, but I also know there are many out there who get comfortable with one or two pitches and just run with it. I think in many ways, not only could that do disservice to a client, I'm not telling you to read them the whole long-term care shopper's guide and then show them every product available on the market, but you do want to leave them with an idea of what options there are out there from an insurance standpoint, or again, even from a complementary non-insurance standpoint. Funding solutions in general is what we formally call them. Um, Beyond just maybe doing them a disservice, you may actually be preventing a sale, right? If you're only working with like one or two different types of products and you say, I got this or this, take it or leave it, both are good, maybe not to that extent, but you may be missing out on offering the solution that the client actually resonates with and gravitates toward. So I think it is important that even if it's brief, you show them the menu of options that are available. And I just want to be sure to highlight one of my favorite of all time marketing pieces that we have available in the Buddy system, and that is the funding solutions piece. Um, I think this is also one of our oldest marketing pieces. This is old faithful to me. If somebody comes to me, they're new with the long-term care market, just so simple, so easy to understand, but also comprehensive, right? We talk
Yeah,
about tradition.
I think we're gonna redo it though.
I think I think
It needs a refresh.
I would be so happy with giving this thing a facelift because
Yeah,
it's not necessarily that it needs it, but it is
it's
important
just
enough to bring to present day,
yeah,
given how long it's been around.
for sure. Yeah.
But we talk about traditional long-term care, we talk about the top features, we talk about the limitations. So the great thing that this piece does is people may fall in love with some of the features of one plan or another, but maybe really turned off by the limitations, right? Or any combination therein, right? So it's really important, even just as a leave behind. You don't need to make this 30 minutes of the conversation and go through everything line by line. You can give a super quick summary of each of these product types and then use it as a leave behind, a reference, something of that nature, just to um, walk people through the options. Or better yet, you could just, again, walk through very briefly some things. You may get some signs of engagement. Oh, I've never heard of that. I like that concept. Because on the group market, the plan designs are primarily life long-term care hybrid plans. Do you know what the most common questions we get on webinars generally have to do with? Well, I already have life insurance. I thought this webinar was about long-term care. Why are you selling me life insurance? I already have enough life insurance. Can I buy the life insurance and the long-term care separately? And I completely understand why those questions get asked. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of things that the life insurance accomplishes for the plan that make it a necessary addition, but the plans are still very long-term care forward in nature. You will find in many cases far more value for the long-term care benefit than you will for the life insurance. Some plans may be an exception, right? True life insurance with long-term care riders will generally give you a lot of life insurance value compared to long-term care, even though you can get a nice bit of long-term care benefit. Hancock's Life Care product, their brand new Life Care product, definitely puts a lot more emphasis on the death benefit. But for many, they're like, why is the life insurance here? So obviously you can go through live, die, or quit, but it also can accomplish other things, right? Like guaranteed premiums can generally be a part of these life hybrid plans because of the life insurance chassis and how the plans are actually priced. So it's important to go through at least some of the high level items and leave them with an idea of what's out there. Beyond this, there's reverse mortgage as an option. Obviously, we're not going to go out front with every client on you should do a reverse mortgage to fund long-term care. That's definitely not the way we would do it. And I would definitely recommend getting an expert involved. But the existence of such a solution still warrants mentioning, right? Self-funding is put on here, right? Again, if you guys are just railing against self-funding as an approach, you are not doing yourself any favors with getting clients to move forward with long-term care insurance. They are going to self-fund in some way, shape, or form. Um, Even again, navigating a 90-day elimination period in some cases, or just excess care costs, they're going to self-fund. And if you tell them that that is not a long-term care planning approach, I don't think people like being invalidated and then being turned around and sold something that goes directly alongside that invalidation. I think if you can make it feel like a valid approach, which it is, you will get a lot more traction with people. So I think there's a number of things that these pieces do. Even some nice questions to consider here. Again, this is probably one of the big facelift items that we'll do because pricing will generally need an update on this. But um, what impact will the need for extended care have on your income? What type of care do you prefer? What solution do you think you can comfortably afford long term? Talk about the different ways that premiums are paid, different payment modes, things like that. And I think pieces like this and talking about things from a really holistic point of view opens up more opportunities for the client to announce their preference, right? So not only are these things that we want to make sure we don't leave the client in the dust with, but it also opens up a ton of different opportunities for engagement of that client. So those were like the two major pieces I wanted to cover that let's make sure we don't blow past some of these foundational topics, and here are kind of the ways that I talk about them. But does anybody have anything that they want to add to their approach or something that they found over time? Hey, I kind of had this feeling that I wasn't talking about XYZ enough. And so I went back and started making that part of my conversations, and it really became a winner for me. I'm really interested to hear. I want to become better presenters together if we can. And I would even ask you, Gretchen, is there anything that you've noticed in creating pieces or in communications to consumers that you feel seems to hit home?
Oh, that's a great question. Because something we talk about a lot is everybody's different and people respond to different things. I mean, one thing we have experienced ourselves is you have people who are super analytical and they're going to dive into every product detail and they're going to, Google everything. And so you have that subset of customer, and then you have the people who are more um, sort of emotion based. So it's gonna be about their experience. Do they have experience with long-term care with a loved one? How that impacted them. They don't want to be a burden on their children or their, family and friends. And so our sort of uh, I think goal would be to be able to provide different approaches to communicating with different types of people. But you have to listen in that conversation, and you guys all know this. You have to be really a top-notch listener because you're listening for those things that you can sort of key in on and to help people better understand what it is that they're purchasing. So,
Such a
yeah,
good point, and I think it is really important that we think about being a good listener, not just as the absence of talking.
right.
Because I know people who are good listeners by closing their mouths while the other person talks, but things might not get taken away from that conversation that need to be, and things aren't followed up and converted on in ways that they should be,
Hmm.
right? So it's important not just to keep your mouth closed while somebody else is talking, but it's really important to try to do that inner work to say, okay, I need to file that statement away because that is something helpful about preference, or it's helpful to me to understand what type of client they are. Are they analytical? Are they emotional? I'm going to go through some basic things because we all have to go through the basics, but how can I actually tailor that from the person I'm in front of, right? I really want to get to know this person because there's so many solutions out there that there really is something for everybody. And we, in general, try to provide something for everybody.
Yeah, and I think that's in my humble opinion, I think that's one of the really cool things about this side of the business rather than the group side, because you can get into those more in-depth conversations with the humans, and you can find out a lot about them by just like you said, just listening and taking note of very, important key things that they tell you. They have children, they have grandchildren. they're going to retire soon. They've got 10 years before they retire. They've got, whatever it is.
Hmm.
Um, just the individual business allows more opportunities for that.
Yeah, on the group side, oftentimes you almost have to treat an entity, even a giant
Yeah,
entity, as like a single person. That's a different thing entirely.
mhm,
Sometimes it feels like you have to do your normal thing, right? I mean, when we're even meeting with individuals, we have a process that we generally try to follow. But sometimes on webinars, it almost feels like I'm babysitting and I'm taking different toys out of the toy box to see like, all right, what toy does the baby like, right?
yeah, yeah,
And you start to get engagement that you can really feel something that you are reviewing is definitely hitting home because 10 questions just came into the chat. And
yeah.
obviously, you can tell a little bit about a person's background, about a group's background or industry that tells you I may have X type of client on my hands. So that gives you an idea of maybe how to order things. Um, if it's an analytical group, I'm putting a calculator in front of them. I'm still going to talk about long-term care planning. I'm still going to show the slide with the four pillars. I
Mhm.
will just tailor the way I go over that slide to be a bit more analytical in nature, as opposed to a little bit more emotional in nature when I'm talking to a group that might be a little bit more feelers. If we're talking to, say, an assisted living facility and their employees, uh, that's generally where I'll take that side. And um, I think all of that is super important. I just don't want people to make individuals or groups feel like they are left behind, right? If you start on step three and they haven't gotten step one, they're already starting with, I don't even know where to begin, right? That's probably the worst place to be um, in your stomach when you're learning something, is that I feel like I missed chapters one and two. So how am I going to follow this? And it's like Steve Elliott said in his buying line presentation, people don't necessarily care how much you know. They will ask about the specific things that they want to know. But if the whole time is just predicated on more knowledge, more knowledge, more knowledge, more knowledge, getting into the really, really fine details of something, it's highly likely that that prospect will, at the end of the meeting, say, hey, you were great. You've given me a lot to think about, or I definitely have to take a look at some of this stuff and think about it, and I'll let you know. That's generally a sign that you may have lost them. You get very limited time to grasp somebody's attention and capitalize on it and give them what they're looking for, right? So you do have to be, to a degree, either perceptive, persuasive, or both, right? To be able to capitalize on that. Different styles are going to lead to different outcomes there, but I think you have to understand who you're in front of. You have to listen to what they're telling you, and you still have to go over the basics, but you have to learn how to do it quickly so you can get them exactly what they want. And sometimes they'll start with a question. I say, go right in that direction, right? Who am I to say, I know you have a question, but I'm kind of pretty good at this presenting thing. So I want to give my piece first and then we'll get to you, right? If they're trying to take you somewhere, take them there. But always circle back just to cover the basics. Um, and that's done with a listening ear.
Yep.
So I think that's what I had planned to talk about. It's more of a sort of soft skills session or a a thinker's sort of session. It's like a little bit meta. We're thinking about the way that we are talking to people, but I think it's a worthwhile exercise. And I think let me know if there is anything that you think is super essential out there to make sure that you cover each and every time, or a good one-liner you have, or a good piece you use, or anything of that nature to your approach that you think works.
Yeah, we're in the very beginning stages of, for those of you who have access to the portal, um, the buddy system, we're in the beginning stages of reviewing some of the content that's in the marketing section. So, if there's any piece in there that you really feel totally connected to and you've downloaded it or you've customized it, whatever, let us know, me or Jason, because we can make sure to evaluate that as part of our process, because we want to give you collateral that will help in your sales process, whether it's a sales tool or marketing collateral. And I don't want to fill that repository with a bunch of stuff that's just sort of noise. So, oh, you're gonna go in there?
I mean, it did
You?
just get a facelift. I
Fantastic.
think
It
I
did.
think we went over
We
it
did.
on the group side study group, but
That's
um,
right. Yeah.
I think it's worth it to just give folks a look. You may notice it looks a little different. Uh, What we are aiming to do is not only make that repository more efficient, but give you ways to find what you need to present easier, right? We have content coming out of our ears, but if you can't find what you're looking for when you don't know what you're looking for, I think the platform is only as good as that. The amount of content is only as good as that.
Right. Right. And
So
yeah.
we do have a couple of ways to filter content. Number one, by the sales journey up here, you can actually click on that. So if I want some pieces that are helpful for prospecting, we've got a number of different handouts that you can provide for prospecting purposes, for getting people's ear, for getting people interested, for light introductory education, right? Um, we have under the Educate tab, again,
There's a
one of
lot.
my all-time favorites. There's
Mhm.
that piece again. Um, and all sorts of different helpful articles. The It's Your Life Planning Guide I find to be really, really helpful as well, with partnership with CLTC.
LTC. Yeah.
Um, Propose is pretty similar right now. I think we're going to be doing some
Yeah.
renovating there as far as
Yep.
product presentation, and then service. So you'll see these steps much more fleshed out with individualized content, and you can search by content type. You can sort by our newest pieces. You can sort by recommended pieces. You can even pin pieces of content. So if you say, I don't want to mess with all that filtering, I just really like the guide to LTC funding solutions, I can pin that. I really like the It's Your Life checklist. I can pin that and go
Mhm.
to my pinned content. I pinned the VA LTC benefits flyer because people ask about that every once in a while, and it always seems to help. Even on group webinars, I get questions about VA LTC.
Yeah,
Um,
and one thing I want to point out, because when you brought that one up, it reminded me a lot of these pieces are created in collaboration with our top specialists. I think I see Diane, or I saw Diane here, um, Lori, Renee, Rhonda. So, or then of course Mark and Jason. So these are pieces that came out of a need at one point. And so, that's the other important thing. It's not marketing working in a silo or sales working in a silo. We're trying to collaborate to give you what you need.
Yeah, I think it would be very difficult to market if you didn't have an idea of what the people distributing the marketing materials needed. And that's how we like to do everything, right? That's how we like to build sales tools. That's how we like to develop marketing materials. That's how we like to have study group sessions.
Mhm.
So your feedback drives a lot of what we do because we know there is a lot to be able to offer the long-term care industry. As many of you as there are, as many carriers as there are, still, still, I would say under-supported as an industry. So if you find yourself with gaps, we can't grant every wish, but just let us know, and we'll be happy to play around and see if we can find something. We may even ask you to give us your insights to actually contribute to the creation of that material. So glad we took that little detour.
Mhm.
Um, I think everybody is just super perfect at having these conversations. So we didn't have anybody kind of talking through, oh, let's see, which piece is best at dealing with the most recent statistics with respect to long-term care incidents, the aging population, and costs. That's a
Oh,
doozy.
that's a great one. Probably the cost of long-term care.
Hmm.
The one that we have right now is from 2024, but it's still, the one thing that always gets me is people get all excited when the new cost of care numbers come out, but it, even if you're looking at 2024 numbers, it's still huge. It's a
Yes.
huge number. So you're going to add 11 billion on top of, an already
Or
existing.
$11 a month on top
Yeah.
of a gigantic bill.
So,
Make sure
yeah,
you have
so
individual clicked
right.
here.
So I know Joe's in the process of updating that piece, but there is a piece that, yeah, that one that you can go in and download. The other one, is, yeah,
I'll just do my Vanna White really quick.
that's excellent, Jason. You're multi-talented.
There's that one.
The other one is I have to get in there because I can never remember the name of it, but it was the one that I created, for Renee. It'll just take me a hot second to find it. Um, oh, it's called LTCI Planning Process ebook.
Oh,
It does sort of, it explains the cost of
there it
care.
is.
Oh, did you find it? Oh,
Hmm.
yeah, yeah. So it has pretty much a little bit of everything. So it talks about the cost of care, the risk, impact, why now is the best time to start planning. And then it shows them the steps, which I think is pretty cool too, because it gives them an understanding of what they can expect as part of the process. So that's one of my favorite pieces.
Yeah, this is good. I don't visit this one enough, but I do like it a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah, this is cool. I think this step by step is very, very helpful as a leave behind because
yeah,
you give them 7 steps and you expect them to just remember. You're just asking to give them a bad surprise. Something they can refer to, even if you point it out to them explicitly, is here's how the process is going to run, right?
right.
It's
And it's
generally
something
similar for everyone.
you can leave with them. So you can walk through it with the client, but you can also leave it, send it to them.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Um, and then the other thing I is, leave them with some kind of other value. Like, Jason pointed out, the piece we did with CLTC, which is really a planning guide. It's kind of like an end of life planning guide. So, there's just tons and tons of content that you are more than welcome to grab and, utilize or customize or whatever. Yeah.
I'm glad you asked that
That
question,
was
and
a
I'm
great
glad
question, Jeffrey.
glad we went over those pieces specifically because I think that's really what was at the heart of my inspiration to have this session was, um, we, especially if you're new to long-term care, we really have to keep things in terms of the real life human impact as well
Mm.
as talking product, but you cannot forget the very, very basics. You got to pretend like I just walked out of the cave for the first time. I'm a primordial long-term care prospect, right? And what would you tell me if it was my first day on Earth? Because it's my first day in your world, if this is the
Mhm.
first time I'm meeting with a long-term care professional. So, got to make the most of it, can't leave them in the dust.
Right, right.
I will send you the It's Complicated planning guide. Hmm, interesting.
Which one is
Networking
it?
that Chris said in the chat, I will send you the It's Complicated
Oh,
planning guide.
I've heard of that.
I have two.
Yeah.
I go to a lot of networking group functions and we'll have a table at a senior care meeting on Friday. I'm thinking of a sample traditional LTC rate sheet so I can give some ballpark numbers. One thing I've found is that people want to know how much rates could be.
Yep.
And I've always had to say, it depends. Yep. As a long-term care specialist, we have to battle the perception that LTC insurance is expensive, of course. We want to focus on family, etc. But in these quick interaction events, I need to grab their attention. Yeah, 100%. I totally agree with you. I think one of the ways to be able to do that is actually our quick quote calculator. So if you don't want to show them the full benefit, buddy, I would still recommend having a laptop and you can even, you know, pull this up on the laptop and say, you know, very simply, based on age, based on gender, based on your hypothetical claim age and a monthly benefit, here's what the costs are, but start affordable, right? If you
Right.
come at it from a perspective of, I am not going to sell somebody more than they can afford, and I know a little bit of coverage can go a long way, then you're not you're not showing somebody what it would be like to be undercovered. You're showing somebody what it would be like to get their foot in the door for long-term care planning when they otherwise might not have. That's the perspective I like to take from that. That's why I like to use something simple like the quick quote calculator, um, because that right away can get people interacting and will give you conceptual pricing, but it will still leave items on the table. Like this is showing, assuming I believe, 6-year benefit. There's even room to start smaller than this, but even at the defaults, you show that this is something that can be relatively affordable, not $400 a month, and still provide very meaningful protection, right? I think that's one of the things the quick quote calculator does really well too. I'm not just sitting here and telling you it's $244 a month. I mean, some people, might just say, done. For me, I say, whoa, you know, that's quite a bit of Skrilla every month to put out for an insurance product. What am I getting? Right? So to say at this premium, we're looking at, you know, upwards of 500,000 of potential benefits if you need care. That brings the two most important pieces together. And yeah, that's what I would recommend is showing them.
Yeah,
Uh,
and you said something, I think it was you, Jason, called yesterday. I can't remember where what it was, but I think it was you that said, you know, really what you want to do, you want to focus a client not so much on long-term care insurance covering all of the cost that normally they're using long-term care insurance. They're using their long-term care insurance. They're using some of their income or other assets to cover all of the costs. So we often say the best long-term care insurance coverage is the coverage you will keep until you need it. So,
100%.
yeah. So I think that's important too when you're showing that calculator.
Yep. And that's something we make sure to say on every single group webinar as well. Thank you for bringing that up. Buy what you can afford and plan to keep,
Right.
right? The especially in the life hybrid market, but in all long-term care insurance,
Mhm.
um, the only people who don't get value out of the plan are people who, you know, buy it, pay premiums, and drop it. I mean,
Well,
there's
it's
return of
simple.
premium provisions with hybrid, um, and cash value and other types of solutions. But at the end of the day, it's it's going to get you at max your premium back.
Mhm.
And that means an insurance company has held on to your premiums. You had the privilege of protection for that amount of time. But at the end of the day, did you did you get a ton of value besides what you had for the time you had protection in place,
Mhm.
right? So buy what you can plan to keep because especially for hybrids, you're going to pass away, need long-term care or both, right? So get something out of it. I think that's a great point. And that encourages, hey, I'm somebody who's about keeping it affordable,
Right.
right? And that gets people in the door with you who, you know, in the future, hey, we had a conversation way back when. I'm a client of yours from 7 years ago. And guess what? I had a windfall and I remembered how important long-term care insurance is. I want to be able to keep these assets protected. I started with a small plan, but can we do more? Right?
Mhm.
I'm not just blowing smoke. That happens to people all the time. I hear about it. Getting people through the door, getting their trust, and really thinking about them at the end of the day, giving them what they want, giving them what they need. It pays dividends if you stay in this business for a long time. So great questions, everybody. I think that was a great way to end the session, really rounded out a bunch of things.
Can I tell everybody what we're going to do next Tuesday?
Yes, you can.
I think you know what we're going to do next Tuesday, but
I think I do
if
too.
not, you're going to learn. We're going to do a shake the tree session. How to prospect with your current book of business, both um, on the individual side, but also can you shake the tree on the for the group side too? So I think I'm going to be interviewing Mark and Jason, and we're going to have a good, lively discussion.
Going to be a good one.
Yeah.
I've got a couple of sessions in the works with some folks I know and love. So you'll just have to stay tuned for those. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Be well, and we'll talk to you next week. Have a
Thanks,
good one.
everyone. Bye.